James sat quietly in the back row of Mr. Wilson's AP Physics class. His dark eyes were fixed on his notebook, but his mind was far away. The classroom walls felt like they were closing in on him. 3 weeks had passed since his mother's cancer diagnosis, and the hospital bills kept coming. Too many bills. Too little money. Every night after school, James worked at the local grocery store. He stocked shelves until midnight, then went home to do homework until his eyes couldn't stay open. He would sleep for a few hours before waking up to get ready for school again. This had been his life for weeks now. James. Perhaps you'd like to share the answer with the class? Mr. Wilson's sharp voice cut through the classroom like a knife. James looked up quickly, confused for a moment about where he was. 24 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. The silence felt heavy. "I'm sorry, what was the question?" James asked in a quiet voice. Mr. Wilson sighed loudly and shook his head. The tall, gray-haired teacher walked slowly between the rows of desks until he stood right in front of James. "This is the third time this week you've been daydreaming in my class," Mr. Wilson said, his voice cold. "If you can't be bothered to pay attention, maybe you shouldn't be in AP Physics." The classroom became even more silent. James felt his face grow hot with shame. His hands began to shake slightly as he gripped his pencil tighter. He bit his lip, trying hard not to show any emotion. "I'm sorry, sir," James managed to say. "It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," Mr. Wilson replied before turning away. "Now, as I was saying before we were interrupted." The teacher continued with the lesson, but James could barely focus. His mind raced with worries about his mother, the bills, his grades slipping, and now this public humiliation. He had always been a good student, one of the best in the school. Last year, he had won the regional science fair with his project on renewable energy. Teachers used to praise him for his hard work and bright mind. Now everything was falling apart. When the bell rang, James gathered his books slowly. He didn't want to make eye contact with anyone. As the other students filed out, he heard Mr. Wilson talking to Mrs. Parker, the English teacher, just outside the door. "Some students just aren't cut out for advanced coursework," Mr. Wilson was saying. "James clearly can't handle it." James froze, his bag half-packed. The words stung more than the earlier humiliation. He had worked so hard to get into AP Physics. It was supposed to help him get a scholarship for university, something he needed now more than ever. With his head down, James left the classroom and walked quickly through the hallway. A few students glanced his way, but no one spoke to him. He felt invisible and alone in the crowded school corridor. During lunch, James didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, he found a quiet spot in the library to look over his mother's medical bills again. The numbers made his head hurt. Even with insurance, they owed thousands. His part-time job barely made a dent. His phone vibrated with a text from his mother. "Doctor says I need to stay overnight for tests. Can you bring my blue bag?" James texted back, "Of course. Right after school." He put his phone away and closed his eyes for a moment. He was so tired. Just so tired. He hadn't told anyone at school about his mother's illness. He didn't want pity or special treatment. He just wanted to handle things himself and make his mother proud. But now, with Mr. Wilson's words ringing in his ears, James wondered if he could really manage everything. His grades were slipping. His focus was shot. And now one of his teachers thought he couldn't cut it. The afternoon classes passed in a blur. When the final bell rang, James hurried to his old car in the parking lot. He needed to go home, pack his mother's things, and then drive to the hospital before his shift at the grocery store. As he pulled out of the school parking lot, James glanced at the school building in his rearview mirror. He would have to do better tomorrow. Somehow, he had to find a way to keep it all together. For his mother. For his future. He just didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending everything was fine. The END Emma Thompson sat 2 rows ahead of James in AP Physics. She was a quiet girl with wavy brown hair who always got good grades. Unlike the other students who quickly forgot about what happened to James, Emma couldn't stop thinking about it. She had noticed the changes in him over the past few weeks. The James she knew from last year was always prepared, always had the right answer, and always stayed after class to help others. Now, he looked tired all the time. His clothes were sometimes wrinkled, as if he had slept in them. The neat notes he used to take had become messy and incomplete. After class ended, Emma slowly packed her books, watching as Mr. Wilson spoke to Mrs. Parker in the hallway. "Some students just aren't cut out for advanced coursework," Mr. Wilson said loudly. "James clearly can't handle it." Emma frowned. That wasn't fair. James was one of the smartest students in their year. Something else had to be going on. The next day, Emma noticed that James wasn't in class. His empty seat in the back row seemed to stand out to her, though no one else seemed to care. "Does anyone know where Mr. Absent is today?" Mr. Wilson asked, looking at the empty chair with a smirk. No one answered. Emma wanted to say something, but she didn't know what was really going on with James, so she stayed quiet. By lunchtime, rumors were spreading through the school. "I heard he's failing all his classes," said Robert, a boy from their physics class. "My brother said he saw him working at Morris Grocery late at night," added another student. "Maybe he just doesn't care about school anymore," suggested a girl named Lucy. Emma listened to all of this while picking at her lunch. She remembered how excited James had been last year when he won the regional science fair. His project on clean energy had impressed everyone, even the university judges. He had talked about wanting to study engineering and create solutions for climate change. People who cared that much about making a difference didn't just suddenly stop caring about school. After lunch, Emma walked past the trophy case in the main hallway. James's science fair trophy was there, with a photo of him smiling proudly next to his project. He looked so different then, well-rested, confident, happy. During her free period, Emma went to the library. As she walked between the bookshelves, she spotted James's best friend from last year, Oliver, reading alone at a table. "Hey, Oliver," Emma said, sitting down across from him. "Have you talked to James lately?" Oliver looked up from his book and shrugged. "Not really. He stopped hanging out after school. Always says he's busy. I tried texting him a few times, but he just sends short replies." "Don't you think that's weird?" Emma asked. "He used to be so involved in everything." "I guess," Oliver said. "He quit the science club too. And he was supposed to be president this year." This surprised Emma. James loved the science club. Last year, he had talked about all the activities he wanted to organize as president. After school, Emma decided to go to Morris Grocery. She told her mom she needed to pick up a few things, but really, she wanted to see if James was working there. The store was nearly empty when she arrived. She walked up and down the aisles, pretending to shop while looking for James. Finally, she spotted him in the back, unloading boxes. James looked even more tired than he did at school. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his movements were slow, like each box was heavier than the last. Emma was about to approach him when she overheard the manager speaking to him. "James, can you cover Tom's shift tomorrow night too? I know you're already working tonight and the weekend." "Yes, sir," James replied without hesitation. "What time?" 5 to midnight. "I know it's a lot with school, but you're the only one I can count on." James nodded. "I'll be here." The next day, James missed school again. Mr. Wilson made another comment about his absence, this time marking a big 0 in his gradebook for the quiz they took. After class, Emma decided to do something. She went to the school office and asked to speak with Headmaster Brown. "It's about James," she explained to the secretary. "I'm worried about him." While waiting outside the headmaster's office, Emma saw something that confirmed her suspicions. Through the window, she spotted James's old car pulling into the hospital parking lot across the street. She watched as he hurried inside, carrying a blue bag. Now she understood. Something was wrong, really wrong, and James was dealing with it all alone. When James returned to school the following Monday, the classroom fell silent as he walked in. He looked worse than before. His clothes were clean, but his face showed how tired he was. Dark circles under his eyes made him look much older than his 17 years. Mr. Wilson didn't waste any time. As soon as James sat down, the teacher called out to him. "Nice of you to join us again, James," Mr. Wilson said with a cold smile. "Since you missed Friday's quiz, you'll receive a 0. James looked up, his eyes showing a flash of worry. "I can make it up," he said quietly. "The school policy allows students to make up missed work if—" "The policy is at my discretion," Mr. Wilson interrupted, his voice sharp. "And I've decided that students who don't prioritize their education don't deserve special treatment." A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Emma looked back at James, who had lowered his head again. She could see his hands shaking slightly as he opened his textbook. The day went on, and James tried to focus in his classes. During lunch, he sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria, looking over what appeared to be bills and paperwork rather than eating. Emma wanted to talk to him, but every time she got close, James would pack up his things and leave. It was as if he was trying to stay invisible. After school, James was about to head to his car when a school secretary found him. "James, Headmaster Brown would like to see you in his office right away," she said. James looked worried. "Am I in trouble?" "No, dear," the secretary said kindly. "Just please come with me." James followed her to the headmaster's office, his mind racing with worries. Was he being kicked out of AP classes? Had his grades fallen too much? He couldn't afford to lose any chance at scholarships. When he opened the office door, he was surprised to find Emma there, along with Oliver and 2 other classmates from the science club. "Please sit down, James," Headmaster Brown said, pointing to an empty chair. James sat down slowly, looking confused. "What's going on?" Headmaster Brown, a kind-looking man with a gray beard, spoke first. "Your friends here are concerned about you, James. And frankly, so am I." Emma leaned forward in her chair. "James," she began hesitantly, "we know something's going on. We've seen you working overnight shifts. Your car's been parked at the hospital every weekend." Oliver added, "You stopped hanging out with everyone. You quit the science club. This isn't like you." "And Mr. Wilson is being unfair to you," said Thomas, another student from their physics class. "We all know you're smart enough for AP Physics." James looked at each of them, then down at his hands. The room was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked up, tears were forming in his eyes. "My mom has stage 3 cancer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad left years ago. It's just us, and I'm trying to help with the bills." The room fell silent. Emma reached out and put her hand on James's arm. "She was diagnosed 3 weeks ago," James continued, the words coming faster now. "The treatments are expensive, even with insurance. I took the job at Morris Grocery to help pay the bills. I work as many shifts as they'll give me." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Oliver asked. James wiped his eyes quickly. "I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I thought I could handle it. Mom always taught me to solve my own problems." Headmaster Brown leaned forward. "James, there's no shame in needing help. That's what community is for." "But my grades are falling," James said. "Mr. Wilson thinks I don't belong in AP Physics anymore. And he might be right. I can't keep up with everything." "Mr. Wilson doesn't know what you're going through," Emma said firmly. "And he's wrong," Thomas added. "You're the smartest one in that class." Headmaster Brown nodded. "James, what you're doing for your mother is admirable. But you don't have to do it alone." For the first time in weeks, James felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't alone anymore. These people knew his secret, and they weren't judging him for struggling. They wanted to help. "What about your mother now?" Emma asked gently. "Is she in the hospital?" James nodded. "She's having treatments 3 times a week. I drive her there and stay with her when I'm not working. The doctors say the cancer responded well to the first round, but she needs more treatment." As James spoke about his mother, the walls he had built around himself began to crumble. The fear and worry he had carried alone for weeks came pouring out. Little did he know, this moment of honesty would lead to changes bigger than he could imagine. The E&D word spread quickly through the school. By the next morning, many students knew about James and his mother. Rather than the pity James had feared, he found something unexpected: support. Emma organized a study group that met during lunch. 5 students from AP Physics took turns explaining the lessons James had missed and helping him understand the new material. Oliver made clear copies of his notes for James to take home. "We can meet at my house on Saturday morning," Thomas suggested. "Just for an hour or two before you go to the hospital." James nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you. All of you." The football team, which James had reluctantly quit at the start of the term, approached him in the hallway. Mark, the team captain, spoke for the group. "We're setting up a fundraiser for your mom's medical expenses," Mark explained. "Coach says we can use the gym for a charity basketball tournament this weekend. Teams will pay to enter, and all the money goes to help your mom." James struggled to find words. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mark replied, patting James's shoulder. "You'd do the same for any of us." Even Mrs. Parker, the English teacher, offered to let James submit his essays later than the other students. "Your situation is exceptional," she told him kindly. "We can be flexible." Only Mr. Wilson remained unmoved. In physics class, he continued to treat James coldly, making small comments about attendance and dedication. When James turned in his late work, Mr. Wilson made a show of marking it down for being late. "Rules are rules," he said loudly enough for the whole class to hear. Emma and the others exchanged looks but said nothing. They had all agreed to help James pass the class despite Mr. Wilson's attitude. On Thursday evening, the school held parent-teacher conferences. James arrived alone, looking uncomfortable in his best shirt, which was slightly wrinkled. His mother was too weak from her latest round of chemotherapy to attend. "Where is your mother?" Mr. Wilson asked when James entered the classroom alone. "She couldn't come," James said simply. "She's not feeling well." Mr. Wilson looked at James over his glasses. "Well, let's get this over with." He opened a folder with James's name on it and began listing all the assignments James had missed or turned in late. He showed James the gradebook with several low marks highlighted in red. "At this rate, you'll fail this term," Mr. Wilson said. "And that will make it very difficult for you to pass the course." "I know I've missed some classes," James began, "but I'm working hard to catch up." "The study group is helping me understand." "Study groups won't make up for missed instruction time," Mr. Wilson interrupted. "And they certainly don't excuse your poor performance." James tried again. "Sir, if I could just explain." "Circumstances don't change academic standards," Mr. Wilson said firmly. "Everyone has problems. The world doesn't stop because of personal issues." James fell silent, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. All the progress he had felt earlier in the week seemed to disappear under Mr. Wilson's harsh words. As they left the classroom, Headmaster Brown was waiting in the hallway. He had overheard the exchange. "James, would you mind waiting here for a moment?" the headmaster asked kindly. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Wilson." James nodded and sat on a bench outside the classroom. Through the partially open door, he could hear Headmaster Brown's voice, though he couldn't make out the exact words. The headmaster's tone was firm but measured. Inside the classroom, Headmaster Brown closed the door and turned to face Mr. Wilson. "A word, please," he said. Mr. Wilson looked annoyed but said nothing. "That young man has maintained a 3.8 GPA while working 30 hours a week and being his mother's primary caretaker," Headmaster Brown said. "Before you judge his commitment to education, perhaps consider what true determination looks like." Mr. Wilson crossed his arms. "I'm holding him to the same standards as everyone else. That's my job." "Your job," Headmaster Brown replied calmly, "is to teach. To inspire. To recognize potential and help it grow. He placed a folder on Mr. Wilson's desk. This is James's academic record from last year. His science fair project. His entrance exam for AP Physics, which, I might add, received the highest score in the school. Mr. Wilson glanced at the folder but didn't open it. Education isn't just about rules and deadlines, Headmaster Brown continued. It's about understanding the whole student. James isn't asking for special treatment. He's asking for basic human compassion while he faces something no child should have to face alone. For the first time, Mr. Wilson's stern expression showed a crack. Perhaps he was remembering his own youth, or thinking of his own children now grown and gone. Whatever the reason, something in the headmaster's words seemed to reach him. Outside in the hallway, James waited, unaware that this conversation would change everything. The E&D the following Monday arrived with gray skies and light rain. James walked through the school doors feeling a little stronger than before. The weekend fundraiser had raised over £2,000 for his mother's medical bills. For the first time in weeks, he had managed to get a full night's sleep. As he approached the physics classroom, James was surprised to see Mr. Wilson standing by the door. The teacher usually waited inside until the bell rang. "James," Mr. Wilson said, his voice lacking its usual sharp tone. "May I speak with you in the hall?" James felt a knot form in his stomach. Was this it? Was Mr. Wilson going to suggest he drop the class? "Yes, sir," James replied, following the teacher to a quiet spot in the hallway. Once they were alone, Mr. Wilson did something that shocked James. He took a deep breath and spoke in a completely different voice than James had ever heard from him. "I owe you an apology," Mr. Wilson said simply. "I made assumptions without understanding your situation. That was wrong of me, both as an educator and as a human being." James stood still, unsure how to respond. Of all the things he had expected, an apology was not one of them. "I understand if you're angry with me," Mr. Wilson continued. "I would be. But I hope you'll give me a chance to make things right." He handed James a folder. "Open it," he said. Inside was information about a prestigious science scholarship specifically for students facing financial hardship. The papers described a full university scholarship plus a monthly living allowance. Clipped to the front was a recommendation letter with Mr. Wilson's signature at the bottom. "Your work from last year shows your potential," Mr. Wilson said. "And what you're doing now, persevering through these circumstances, demonstrates something even more valuable." James read the letter, his hands shaking slightly. The words were kind, respectful, even admiring. Nothing like the way Mr. Wilson had spoken to him in class. "Why?" James asked simply. Mr. Wilson looked down for a moment. "Headmaster Brown helped me see things more clearly. But also..." He paused. "My wife had cancer, 15 years ago. I know what it's like to sit in hospital rooms, to feel helpless, to watch someone you love suffer." James looked up, seeing his teacher in a new light. "She survived," Mr. Wilson added. "And your mother will too. But you shouldn't have to face this alone." From that day forward, things began to change. Mr. Wilson worked with James to make a plan for catching up in physics. He offered extra help before school and adjusted some assignment deadlines. In class, Mr. Wilson's attitude toward all students softened slightly. He was still strict about learning the material, but he began to show more patience, more understanding that learning happens in different ways. For James, the support from classmates, teachers, and even the community made all the difference. His mother's treatments continued, and while she still had difficult days, her doctors were pleased with her progress. 3 months later, on a sunny June morning, James stood on stage at graduation. He wore a crisp blue gown and a bright smile. In the audience, his mother watched from her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. The cancer was in remission, and though recovery would take time, the worst was behind them. Beside his mother sat Mr. Wilson, who had become one of James's strongest advocates. In the end, James had not only passed AP Physics, he had earned the highest score in the class on the final exam. James Thompson, Headmaster Brown announced, recipient of the National Science Foundation Scholarship. The crowd applauded as James accepted his diploma and the scholarship certificate. As he moved his tassel from right to left, he caught his mother's eye. She smiled and mouthed the words, "So proud of you." After the ceremony, James found Mr. Wilson in the crowd. "Thank you," James said, extending his hand. "For everything." Mr. Wilson shook his hand firmly. "You did the hard part. I just got out of your way." "No," James replied. "You taught me something important. Something beyond physics." "And what's that?" Mr. Wilson asked. "That it's okay to not be okay sometimes. That asking for help isn't weakness. That people can change, including me." Mr. Wilson nodded, his eyes showing a hint of emotion. "Those are the most important lessons I could ever teach." As they walked together toward the reception, James realized how much had changed since that day in physics class when he couldn't answer Mr. Wilson's question. The journey had been difficult, the pain real, but he wasn't the same person anymore. Sometimes the greatest lessons in a classroom have nothing to do with the subject being taught. Sometimes they're about courage, compassion, and the strength that comes from facing life's hardest challenges together rather than alone. The end.